So let's start from the beginning. What is an NFT for people that have no concept of this?
So you should probably interview somebody who has the background in the technical aspects of Ethereum. My understanding of it is it's essentially it's a non-fungible token. So the transfer of an asset that proves ownership of something that cannot be copied or manipulated or transferred without the consent of the parties in the transaction. So the digital file itself is can be anything. The NFT is kind of the token that authenticates that digital file. So it's almost like a signature from the creator. So if I made a piece of art and I mint that piece of art, it gets it becomes an NFT, or an NFT is attached to it. And then that NFT is the the atomic unit that people are bidding on, but it's associated with this piece of artwork or, this physical asset. And as this space evolves, the NFT, I think, is going to represent or can represent a whole bunch of things. The reason we're seeing art at the forefront, I think, is because it's so tangible and, people can look at it, point at it, understand it. And a lot of the technical aspects of Ethereum, even for somebody who's in this space now and trying to onboard really quickly, are incredibly difficult to understand. And like smart contracts in general, the breadth of applications that exist for those things is just so overwhelming that I think why we're seeing NFTs explode is because it just taps into this piece of culture where someone could say, hey, I own this thing, right? Which has been important for such a long time.
Yeah, if I were going to put it another way, as you're describing it, I'm hearing so let's imagine you're in New York City and you're going to go buy art, right? You could just go buy a painting, but if you get a painting with the signature of the artist and there's evidence like actually Matisse signed that, Botero signed that, and then that makes it more valuable because people know, hey, this isn't just an infinitely reproducible thing. But in the digital world, if you, for example, who run Visualize Value, which is this prolific, incredibly simple graphics, taking wisdom and compressing them into a diagram or an image that makes people say like, oh, I add another layer into that quote and it makes it more valuable. So you're creating art. But the challenge in the digital world is once you put it out there, people could replicate it infinitely and say, no, I have the first one. No, I have the first one. Right. And this is a way of having you sign that digitally the way you would with a painting and saying, if there's any changes made to this, it will no longer have the signature on it. But as long as you have this one token, then you can reference the fact that I, the artist, said that this was an original. Mm-hmm. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I did not understand that entirely before. I think that the concept of a digital signature really makes a lot of sense in the way that somehow digital work was going to have to be creditable to the author, because otherwise you have this like tragedy of the commons issue where once I see your thing, I can infinitely replicate it.
Yeah, I think it's like, and the reason there's so much like crazy pushback is because it just feels unnatural, right? But I think we don't acknowledge how like prevalent that behavior is already in our life. Even fine art collectors, and I learned this from watching Billions. I don't know if you've seen that, what is it, HBO Showtime show? But these guys are collecting masterpieces and they have them stored in a vault in the Swiss Alps somewhere, and then they have the perfect replica displayed in the home in some cases. So I've also heard stories about people that have jewelry, so they'll buy like De Beers diamonds, and when they're out on the street they have the perfect replica made of moissanite or something. So there's this interesting difference between like the value in these things, I think, is your relationship to the thing, not necessarily the thing, if that makes sense. You can, with an NFT or a digital file, you can clone it 100,000 times and put it everywhere. And honestly, maybe that makes it more valuable to the collector because so many people you can fund the work of an artist you believe in and show it to everybody, but you still get that I own this thing. I am the, you know, the, someone actually made an amazing comparison yesterday. It's like Renaissance era,
patronage.
So you can fund one, like there's one patron and one artist, and you can fund their entire career. But the difference is everybody gets to see their work. People are building, to your point about virtual reality, the guy that won the Beeple auction for 69 million commissioned an architect to build a museum in virtual reality to display that work. So he bought it, and now you can go and strap your VR headset on and walk around this museum that he had commissioned to go and see that work. So it's fascinating, moving incredibly fast.
Let's talk about you, because you jumped in on it, right? A lot of people would have seen NFTs and been like, oh, that's the future, or oh, that's exciting. But there's very few people that would be like, even though I don't understand Ethereum, I'm going to jump into this space. So how did you do that?
Yeah, so where was I? I've been hearing about it. We have a community of a couple thousand people who are into all sorts of things, technology. So there's a lot of crypto enthusiasts in there, a lot of technologists. And I've been getting messages over the last 6 months or so, like, oh, you should tokenize this thing, or you should look into what Ethereum can do and what smart contracts could do for like stuff within the product. So maybe you issue a token and people like earn tokens for completing modules in the education products and things of that nature. And I was like, yeah, it sounds good, but it's like honestly super clunky. So like user experience wise, one, I don't feel like I have the expertise to implement it and really understand it. And two, I think because, you know, we have technically less literate people join our community all the time, is that like way too high of a barrier to entry. So it was on my radar a long time ago. And then I started to look at the platforms where digital art was being auctioned. And for the most part, it was like there was incredibly, like all these crypto native products are generally very complex, or they feel very complex because engineers designed them, or people that have been really native to the space have designed them. They're amazing, but for like the mass market, they're incredibly difficult to use. So I think the real catalyst was starting to see a couple of the platforms arrive that are way more user friendly, and that felt more consistent with the simplicity of the work. And I think I just had a friend introduce me to the guy that runs an app called Foundation, which is I think the cleanest iteration of an auction platform so far. And I just thought, I'll throw something up that I'd already made, and we'll see how it goes. And I think the audience that had been...
To put that up, you're saying I took a piece of art that I'd created and I put it up for auction with these guys that run a group called Foundation. And like, you really had no idea what was going to happen, right? It could have been that you paid whatever, I don't know what it is, $50 or whatever to list something and then not make any money on it at all. But instead, the auction opens up and suddenly people realize Jack Butcher is selling an NFT of visualized value. So what happened then?
So the first one, so it's a really interesting mechanic. There is an open auction format. So when the first bid comes in, the auction begins. So you set a reserve price, and once that reserve is met, there's a 24-hour countdown. And then the really interesting mechanic is the last 15 minutes. Anybody who bids in the last 15 minutes extends the auction back up to 15 minutes. So you can like snipe like an eBay type transaction, you know, which is fascinating again in this space. That mechanic, I think, has been really powerful for the adoption and interest in NFTs. Like some of these platforms have made these tiny tweaks, and I think they've had like massive effects.
Well, and there's something to an auction. Like, I don't know if you've ever been to a physical auction before, like particularly in the ag community. It is an art to have somebody that's there and that cadence that they're getting into, and they're trying to like eke money out of these people and those people. And I mean, I love it. It's like it's a form of a drug, and that's why ag doesn't lose it. That's why they in part having gone all digital is because it's so exciting. But when you translate that online, you don't have that same excitement. You just have people sitting at your computer. You're like waiting, can I get this bid in with 3 seconds left?
Right.
But if you add that little extra, then you extend it by 15 minutes, now you keep the game going fast.
Exactly. And, you have the Twitter layer on top of that where people are watching it and bidding. And so that the first one was crazy. The first one went for 30 Ethereum. The first piece was like Genesis piece, which I think, you could just come out of the gate with a piece of work because it was the first ever piece of work, and people maybe speculate on that. You're going to be an artist that might do all right, and the first piece of art you ever published is valuable for that reason.
Yeah, so it's like having a way to. When people say I would bet on you, I'd put if your number was 31 black, I would take it. That's exactly what this is like with the NFT. And you're like, I bet 1, NFTs will be valuable in the future, and 2, if NFTs are valuable, I think Jack Butcher's NFTs will be the most valuable.
Yeah, it's a bit. Yeah, you're definitely gambling on multiple layers. It's cool.
And so, would you say like 30 Ethereum? What's Ethereum trading for these days?
Close to $2,000 today. So it's like,
yeah, dude, you had to be sitting at your computer just like
crazy.
Losing your mind.
It was crazy for sure. It's crazy.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.